In a quiet park, a little beggar girl observes a wheelchair-bound gentleman with a sad expression. When she gets a little closer, she notices tears streaming down his eyes. The innocent girl approaches him and asks, "Sir, can I give you a hug?" The gentleman, who carried deep sadness in his gaze, is startled and looks at the girl. Suddenly, she wraps her little arms around him and says some things the gentleman never expected. She didn't know he was a millionaire. And the next day, something extraordinary happens, catching everyone's attention. 200 soldiers appear in uniform, each carrying something very strange. They were all looking for the child. What happens next leaves everyone at the scene in shock. The grey afternoon hung over Central Park like a shroud of melancholy. Among the empty benches and trees, swaying gently in the cold wind, a solitary figure remained motionless. General Arthur H. Mitchell, at 70, watched the world through, eyes that had seen far too much. His wheelchair was positioned near the pond, where ducks swam in circles, oblivious to the human drama unfolding nearby. Tears streamed silently down the wrinkled face of the man who had once commanded entire battalions. His hands, once steady holding ceremonial swords and shaking those of presidents, now trembled slightly on the blanket covering his legs. The military uniform had given way to simple clothes, but his posture still held traces of the discipline that had been his companion for decades. 3 years. 3 long years since Clara had gone, taking with her not only her companionship, but the very meaning of his existence. The large, empty Upper East Side townhouse echoed only with the sound of his bleak thoughts. The staff spoke in whispers, as if afraid to shatter what was left of a man who had faced enemies on battlefields, but was now succumbing to the cruelest solitude. On this particular afternoon, Arthur had made a decision. His fingers discreetly touched the small vial in his pocket, where he kept what he believed was his last hope for peace. He could no longer bear the weight of the emptiness in his chest. The medals on the wall at home, the praise in yellowed, newspapers, the photographs with dignitaries, none of it mattered when you were utterly alone. It was then that a small shadow approached. Arthur looked up, surprised to see a little girl about 6 years old walking toward him. Her clothes were worn but clean, and her brown hair was tied in a messy ponytail, her large, curious eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that unsettled him. The child stopped a few feet away, tilting her head like an inquisitive bird. Arthur tried to hide his tears, quickly wiping his face with his hand, but it was too late. The girl had seen everything, and her expression softened with a compassion that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Are you sad, mister?" she asked, her voice sweet yet direct. Arthur was silent, unsure how to respond. He hadn't spoken to anyone but his staff for months, and he had certainly never been asked about his feelings so simply and honestly. The girl took a step forward, her eyes shining with a determination that strangely reminded him of a soldier about to carry out an important mission. "Can I give you a hug?" she asked, already extending her small arms. Without waiting for an answer, she ran to him and wrapped him in a tight embrace. Her skinny arms managed to partially circle the general's torso, and she rested her head on his shoulder with a trust that left him completely disarmed. The human warmth Arthur hadn't felt in years washed over him like a warm wave. His hands hesitated for a moment before he returned the hug, gently touching the child's back. It was as if all the ice that had formed around his heart began to melt instantly. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Thank you, little one." They remained that way for a few minutes, a retired general and an unknown girl, united by a moment of pure humanity in the midst of the world's coldness. Arthur felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a spark of hope beginning to flicker timidly in his chest. When the girl finally pulled away, she smiled at him with a genuine joy that lit up her entire face. Arthur realized that for the first time in months, he had stopped thinking about the small vial in his pocket. The girl moved back slightly but didn't leave. Instead, she sat on the ground beside his wheelchair, crossing her little legs and looking at the pond, as if it were the most interesting place in the world. Arthur watched her with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. How long had it been since someone had approached him without an ulterior motive? "I cry sometimes too," she confessed, breaking the silence with unnerving ease. "Especially at night, when Grandma's asleep and I'm just looking out the window." The child's words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. He had assumed that only adults carried heavy burdens, but here was a 6-year-old girl talking about nighttime tears with a maturity she shouldn't possess. "Why do you cry, little one?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. She sighed deeply, a sound that seemed to come from someone much older. "Because I don't have a big family like other kids. It's just my grandma, but she's always sick in bed, and I don't have any friends to play with either." Arthur felt his chest tighten. For decades, he had commanded men, made decisions that affected thousands of lives, but he had never felt as powerless as he did in that moment, faced with the raw loneliness of a child. "I live in a really tiny apartment," she continued, drawing circles in the dirt with her finger. "Grandma says I used to have parents, but they left when I was a baby. She says they weren't bad people, just they didn't know how to take care of me." The general closed his eyes for a moment. His 16-room mansion, his fortune, his influential contacts. It all seemed ridiculously insignificant in the face of this child's basic need for someone to talk to. "What about you?" she asked, turning to face him with those big, sincere eyes. "Why were you crying?" Arthur hesitated. How could he explain to a child the void that consumes a man when he loses the one person who truly loved him? How could he describe the feeling that all his military achievements, all his accomplishments meant nothing when there was no one to share them with? "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he finally said, surprised at his own honesty. She was my everything, and now I feel very lonely too." The girl nodded seriously, as if she understood perfectly. "Loneliness hurts, doesn't it? It's like there's a big hole right here inside," she said, pointing to her chest. "Exactly," Arthur murmured, impressed by the child's perception. They fell silent for a few minutes, two human beings of vastly different ages, united by the same fundamental pain. The general looked at the frail little girl and realized something extraordinary. Despite all his wealth, status, and achievements, he felt just as lost and abandoned as she did. "You know what I always imagine," the girl said, breaking his train of thought. "I imagine what it would be like to have lots of people around me, a big table full of people at dinner, voices talking, laughter. It must be really nice to have a big family." Arthur swallowed hard. His dining table that seated 12 hadn't seen a guest in years. The only sounds in his house were the footsteps of the staff and the echo of his own solitude. "I have a big table," he admitted slowly, "but I eat alone every day." The girl looked at him with an expression of understanding that seemed far too old for her young face. "So we both have the same problem, don't we? You have a big empty table and I don't even have a table." The brutal simplicity of her observation left Arthur speechless. In that moment, he realized he had found someone who understood his pain in a way that not even his old military comrades could. The sun began to set, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected on the calm surface of the pond. The girl stood up and brushed the dirt from her clothes, but showed no hurry to leave. Instead, she stood there, as if gathering courage for something important. "Mister," she said hesitantly, "can I ask you a kind of silly question?" Arthur nodded, curious to know what this child would consider a silly question after the depth of their conversation. "Have you ever wanted to just give up on everything?" The words came out in a whisper, but carried a weight that made the general's heart pound. The question hit him like a sniper's bullet. How could this 6-year-old see through him with such clarity? His eyes filled with tears again, but this time he didn't try to hide them. "Yes, little one. Just today, I was thinking about it," he admitted, his voice trembling with emotion. "And you?" She nodded slowly, her large eyes filling with a sadness no child should ever carry. "Sometimes I look out the window and think it would be easier if I just went away too, like my parents. Then Grandma wouldn't have to spend her little bit of money on me, and she could buy the medicine she needs." The dagger? Those words drove into Arthur's chest was so painful he had to grip the arm of his wheelchair to keep from collapsing. A 6-year-old considering? No, it was impossible to accept. "No," he said, with a firmness he hadn't felt in years, his voice carrying all the authority of decades of military command. "Don't you ever think like that again. You are important. You have value. He stopped, realizing he was talking to himself as much as to her. The words he directed at the girl were exactly what his own heart needed to hear. "You're important too," she said softly, as if she could read his mind. "I saw it in your eyes. You have a good heart. That's why you were crying in the park, because you still care about things." Arthur fell silent, processing that simple yet profound observation. Maybe she was right. Maybe his tears weren't just despair, but proof that something was still alive inside him. "You know what I think?" the girl continued, sitting down beside his chair again. "I think we met today because we needed each other, like when two halves come together to make a whole." The innocence with which she spoke of such complex concepts amazed Arthur. In his military career, he had met brilliant strategists, philosophers, and intellectuals, but none had touched on such fundamental questions with such simplicity. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, realizing they had shared intimate moments without even introducing themselves. "Sophia," she answered with a shy smile. "Sophia Marie Williams. And you?" "General Arthur H. Mitchell," he said automatically, then corrected himself. "But you can just call me Arthur." "A general?" Sophia's eyes widened in awe. "For real? You commanded soldiers?" For the first time in years, Arthur smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I did. A lot of them." "That's so cool. I bet they respected you a lot." She paused, then added thoughtfully, "It must be hard to go from commanding lots of people to being all alone." Once again, the child's insight surprised him. She had precisely identified one of the sources of his suffering, the abrupt transition from command and responsibility to isolation and uselessness. The sky was growing darker when Sophia finally stood up to leave. "I have to get home or Grandma will worry," she explained. "Bye, Arthur," she said, waving cheerfully. "I hope you feel better." As he watched her walk away, alone on the darkening park paths, Arthur felt something extraordinary happen in his chest. For the first time in months, a spark of hope flickered to life. Arthur remained in the park until the first stars appeared. For the first time in months, he felt no hurry to return home. His encounter with Sophia had awakened something inside him he thought was dead forever. His hands no longer touched the small vial in his pocket. Instead, his thoughts were completely consumed by that extraordinary child. When he finally returned to his mansion, the staff noticed the change immediately. His driver, Frank, who had been with him for 15 years, commented discreetly to the housekeeper that the boss seemed different. His shoulders weren't as stooped, and he had murmured, "Thank you," when getting out of the car, something he hadn't done in a long time. Mrs. Carmen, the housekeeper, prepared dinner as usual, but was surprised when Arthur asked to eat in the main dining room instead of the small study where he'd eaten alone for the past few years. Even more surprising was seeing him eat with an appetite, a rare occurrence since Clara's death. After dinner, Arthur went to his study and stood for a long time looking at the photographs on the walls. Images of his military career, medals, meetings with dignitaries, but mostly photos with Clara at social events, on trips, happy moments from a past that seemed to belong to someone else. There was one specific photo he always avoided. Clara hugging a child at an orphanage they had visited years ago. She'd always wanted to be a mother, but health complications had made it impossible. That night, for the first time since her death, Arthur could look at the photo without feeling only pain. There was also a strange sense of purpose beginning to form in his chest. Around 11 o'clock, he did something he hadn't done in years. He picked up his personal phone and started scrolling through old contacts. His fingers hesitated over several names: former battalion comrades, old subordinates, people he respected who still held important positions in the army. Finally, he dialed a number he knew by heart, even after so long. "Colonel Evans?" he said. When the call was answered, "General Mitchell." "My God, sir, it's been a long time. How are you?" The voice on the other end sounded genuinely surprised and pleased. I'm better, Evans. I need a favor, a very special favor." There was a brief pause before the colonel replied. "Anything, General. You know you can count on me." Arthur took a deep breath. "I need 200 men tomorrow morning. Full-dress uniforms, exemplary conduct, but it's not for an official ceremony. 200 men!" The surprise was evident in the colonel's voice. "For what kind of operation, sir?" "An operation to make a child smile," Arthur answered simply. The silence on the other end of the line lasted a few seconds before Evans replied, "General, with all due respect, may I ask if you're all right?" Arthur chuckled, a low laugh, but the first genuine one in years. "For the first time in a long time, Evans, I think I'm starting to be. Just trust me on this one." He spent the next 20 minutes explaining his plan, asking for absolute discretion, and assuring the colonel he would take full responsibility for any questions from higher-ups. The colonel, despite the strangeness of the request, agreed without hesitation. His loyalty to the general was unquestionable. After hanging up, Arthur made several other calls. Each conversation was careful, specific, detailing aspects of an operation that no military manual had ever contemplated. This wasn't about a strategy of war, but a strategy of the heart. At 2 in the morning, when he finally went to bed, Arthur felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Positive anticipation. For the first time since Clara's death, he was eager for the dawn to arrive. As he closed his eyes, one last image flashed through his mind: Sophia's shy smile when she'd said, "I hope you feel better." Tomorrow, he would make sure things were better, not just for him, but especially for her. The dawn brought an unusual bustle to the silent routine of the Mitchell mansion. Arthur woke before his usual time, at 5:30, with an energy he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Clara's death, he didn't have to force himself out of bed. He rose naturally, driven by a sense of purpose he had forgotten existed. Mrs. Carman nearly dropped the coffee tray when she saw her employer walk into the kitchen, already dressed and shaved, with a different light in his eyes. He asked for strong coffee and toast, showing an appetite she hadn't seen in months. "Mrs. Carman," he said while sipping his coffee, "today is going to be a special day. Very special." The housekeeper smiled, noticing that for the first time in a long time, he didn't seem to be carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "May I ask why, General?" "Because today I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago," he answered mysteriously. "I'm going to use everything I've achieved in my life for something that truly matters." By 7 a.m., Arthur was already in Central Park, strategically positioned near the same bench where he had met Sophia the day before. He had arrived early on purpose. He wanted to watch the morning rhythm, to understand the child's routine, to get to know the world she lived in. The morning park was different from the afternoon. Joggers passed on the trails. Seniors took gentle, Walks and a few mothers brought small children to the playgrounds. Arthur observed it all with renewed attention, as if seeing the place for the first time. Around 8:30, he spotted a familiar figure walking slowly down a path. Sophia appeared from the same direction as the day before, but this time she wasn't alone. A grey-haired woman, looking to be in her 60s, walked beside her with difficulty, leaning on a makeshift cane. Arthur watched the two of them approach a distant bench. The woman, surely Sophia's grandmother, sat down with evident relief, while the girl stood beside her, talking animatedly about something he couldn't hear from that distance. Even from afar, the old woman's fragility was clear. Her movements were slow and careful, and she occasionally brought a hand to her chest, as if struggling to breathe. Sophia, ever attentive, constantly adjusted her grandmother's cane and checked to see if she was comfortable. Arthur's heart ached as he watched the scene. The responsibility on that 6-year-old's shoulders was visible even from a distance. She cared for her grandmother with a dedication many adults didn't show, and she did it naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. At 9 o'clock sharp, Arthur's phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Evans. Operation underway. 200 men in position as requested. Awaiting your orders, General. Arthur took a deep breath. He was about to do something completely outside of any military protocol, something that might seem like madness to many, but to him, it was the sanest thing he had done in years. He typed his reply, "Begin the movement. Remember, total discipline, but the objective is joy, and don't forget the balloons." While he waited for his men to arrive, Arthur watched Sophia playing alone near the bench where her grandmother rested. She had found some wildflowers and was making a small bouquet, probably for the old woman. The scene was so tender, it brought tears to the general's eyes again, but this time they were tears of hope. In a few minutes, his life would change forever. And more importantly, the life of that special child would never be the same. The rhythmic sound of marching boots echoed from the streets adjacent to the park, growing louder with each passing second. The morning park goers stopped their activities, intrigued by the approaching military sound. Mothers scooped up their children, joggers paused their runs, and even the birds seemed to fall silent. Sophia was crouched near a flower bed collecting daisies for her grandmother when she heard the strange sound. She looked up, confused, trying to identify where the coordinated, imposing noise was coming from. Her grandmother, Eleanor, also noticed and instinctively squeezed the girl's hand. And then they appeared. 200 soldiers in full dress uniform emerged simultaneously from every entrance to the park, marching in perfect formation. Their uniforms were impeccable, their boots shone in the morning sun, and each one carried colorful balloons, an image so surreal it seemed torn from a dream. The entire park froze. Children pointed in amazement. Adults whispered among themselves, trying to understand what was happening, and some even pulled out their phones to record the inexplicable scene. 200 professional soldiers marching with party balloons was not something anyone expected to see on an ordinary morning. Sophia hid behind the nearest tree, pulling her grandmother by the hand. Her eyes were wide, with a mix of fear and fascination. She had never seen so many soldiers together, and the precision of their movements was both impressive and intimidating. The soldiers formed a perfect honor guard, a corridor stretching from the main park entrance to the center of the recreational area. They stood at attention, still as statues, but the colorful balloons created a cheerful contrast to their military seriousness. For a few minutes, there was total silence. Then, the sound of wheels on pavement broke the tension. Arthur appeared at the end of the corridor, impeccably dressed in his own full military uniform, adorned with every medal and decoration he had earned over decades of service. His wheelchair glided smoothly down the path his men had created. and his face held a serene determination he hadn't shown in years. He advanced slowly down the honor guard as every soldier saluted simultaneously. The crisp sound of 200 arms moving in unison echoed through the park like controlled thunder. It was a display of respect and discipline that few civilians ever get to witness. Arthur stopped in the center of the park and turned his chair toward the tree where Sophia was hiding. His eyes met hers, and he smiled. A warm, fatherly smile, completely different from the melancholy expression of the day before. Sophia Marie Williams. His voice carried the full authority of a commander, but also a tenderness that made the little girl's heart race. "Yesterday, you said you wished you had friends to play with." The girl stepped out slowly from behind the tree, still holding her grandmother's hand, who watched the scene with a mixture of astonishment and concern. Sophia took a few hesitant steps toward the general, her eyes darting between him and the 200 soldiers who remained at attention. "So," Arthur continued, his voice echoing across the park, "I brought 200 friends to play with you." The moment he finished speaking, something magical happened. The 200 soldiers, in perfect synchrony, relaxed their military postures and smiled. It was as if a spell had been instantly broken, transforming disciplined warriors into willing playmates ready to make a child happy. The balloons were released into the air, creating an explosion of color against the blue sky. Sophia stood with her mouth agape, unable to fully process what was happening before her eyes. What happened next turned Central Park into the most extraordinary scene that city had ever witnessed. The soldiers, maintaining their characteristic discipline, quickly organized themselves into specialized groups. Some set up a giant hopscotch grid using rope and chalk. Others created a child-friendly obstacle course, and one group dedicated itself to holding a story time circle. Sophia remained motionless for a few moments, trying to process the surreal reality before her. 200 men trained for war were now preparing to play with her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her grandmother, Eleanor, leaned heavily on her cane, watching with tears in her eyes. "Go on, little one," Arthur encouraged softly. "They're waiting for you." Hesitantly, Sophia took the first steps toward the nearest group. A serious-looking sergeant with a grey mustache crouched down to her level and asked in a gentle voice, "Young lady, do you know how to play hide and seek?" Sophia's eyes lit up instantly. "I do." "Then you're going to have to teach 200 soldiers how to hide properly, because I bet we're terrible at it," he said with a wink, drawing a crystal-clear laugh from the girl. In a matter of minutes, the park had transformed into a battlefield of fun. Soldiers hid behind trees that could barely cover their large frames, pretended to be invisible behind small bushes, and a few even tried to hide behind each other in formations that made Sophia giggle uncontrollably. Arthur watched it all from his wheelchair, positioned next to Eleanor. His eyes shone with a joy he hadn't felt in years. Seeing these men, trained for extreme situations, dedicating their full attention and creativity to making one little girl smile, was the most beautiful sight he had ever witnessed. "Thank you," Eleanor murmured beside him, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but thank you." Arthur turned to the old woman, noticing for the first time the details of her face, marked by suffering. Her eyes were weary, her breathing was labored, and her hands trembled slightly. It was clear she was fighting something more serious than just old age. "I'm just someone your granddaughter saved yesterday," he replied simply. As they talked, Sophia had become the center of a military-grade party. Groups of soldiers took turns playing with her, always maintaining discipline and respect, but with a spontaneity that surprised even their commanding officers. Some sang marching cadences adapted into nursery rhyme melodies. Others demonstrated clumsy dance moves that made the girl laugh until she was breathless. Something profoundly transformative was happening, not just for Sophia, who for the first Time in her life was the center of attention in a completely positive way, but also for the soldiers. Many of them were fathers, grandfathers, men who rarely had the opportunity to express their softer side so freely and openly. It was in the midst of this contagious joy that Arthur noticed something that would completely change the course of the coming days. Eleanor had a violent coughing fit, clutching her chest with an expression of intense pain. When she pulled her hand away from her mouth, it was stained with blood. The old woman quickly tried to hide it, wiping her hand on her dress and forcing a smile when Sophia glanced in her direction, but Arthur had seen everything. The military instinct that had guided his entire life activated instantly. A silent emergency was unfolding right before his eyes. In that moment, Arthur understood that his mission had become far greater than just making a child smile. He had found not only a kindred spirit in suffering, but an entire family fighting a battle they might not be able to win alone. After 3 hours of intense play, the soldiers formed up for their departure. Sophia was radiant, her cheeks flushed from running and her hair a happy mess. Each soldier filed past her, offering a salute and wishing her a good day, as if she were a high-ranking officer. Colonel Evans approached Arthur with a look of satisfaction. He rarely showed. "General, in 30 years of service, I've never seen my men so motivated for a mission. You should have seen their smiles." "Thank you, Evans. This meant more to me than any operation we've ever commanded," Arthur replied, still watching Sophia wave enthusiastically to the departing soldiers. When the last soldier had disappeared, the park returned to its usual tranquility, but the transformative energy of what had just happened still hung in the air. Sophia ran to Arthur, her eyes shining with pure joy. "Arthur, that was amazing! How did you do that? How did you get so many soldiers to come just to play with me?" The questions tumbled out, a testament to her genuine excitement. Arthur smiled, touched by her spontaneity. "Let's just say I have a few friends who owe me favors," he answered mysteriously. "But the important thing is, did you have fun?" "It was the best day of my whole life," Sophia exclaimed, jumping for joy. "I never knew there were so many nice people in the world." As they talked, Arthur kept a discreet eye on Eleanor, who remained on the bench, clearly struggling. The old woman tried to hide her discomfort, but it was obvious that something was seriously wrong with her health. "Sophia," Arthur said carefully, "your grandmother looks tired. How about we go sit with her for a bit?" They approached the bench where Eleanor was resting. Up close, Arthur could better see the signs that worried him. The excessive pallor, the ragged breathing, the tremor in her hands. His years of military experience, where he'd learned to rapidly assess the physical state of his men, told him this woman was facing something severe. "Ms. Eleanor," he said respectfully, "may I ask how you're feeling?" The old woman hesitated, glancing at Sophia, who was playing with one of the balloons she'd been given. "I'm fine, thank you for your concern. Just a little tired." Arthur saw through the white lie immediately. "With all due respect, ma'am, you don't look fine. Wouldn't it be better to see a doctor?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears she tried to quickly hide. "Sir, we can't afford a private doctor. And at the public clinic, the waiting list is months long. I tried to get an appointment, but Grandma's had a bad cough for a long time," Sophia interrupted innocently, not sensing the discomfort her words caused. "Sometimes she coughs up blood, but she says that's normal when you get old." Arthur's heart nearly stopped. A cough with blood in a woman her age could indicate serious lung problems, possibly cancer. The urgency of the situation hit him like a physical blow. "Ms. Eleanor," he said with all the gentleness he could muster, "I would very much like to help. I can arrange a private medical consultation for you today, if you'll allow me." The old woman looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "Why would a stranger do this for us? What kind of interest do you have in Sophia?" Arthur understood her concern perfectly. A vulnerable child always attracted attention from people with bad intentions, and Eleanor was being cautious. "I have no interest other than to repay the kindness your granddaughter showed me yesterday," he answered sincerely. "She saved my life, Miss Eleanor, literally, and now I want to save yours." The words carried such a profound truth that the old woman felt her defenses begin to lower. The next afternoon, Arthur was in his study organizing the medical contacts. He had gathered to help Eleanor when his phone rang. The name on the screen made him frown. Dr. Matthew Mitchell, his nephew and the family's attorney. "Uncle Arthur, we need to talk." "Urgently," Matthew said without preamble. "I'm on my way over." With Rick and Trish, Arthur sighed deeply. His 3 nephews, the children of his late brother, were his only remaining family. However, since Clara's death, the relationship had become purely financial. They were interested only in his inheritance, visiting him sporadically with fake smiles and feigned concern. An hour later, the 3 of them were in his living room. Matthew, the attorney, took the lead, while Richard, a businessman, and Patricia, a doctor, supported him with worried expressions that fooled no one. "Uncle, we've received some disturbing information," Matthew began, opening a folder full of documents. "We were told that you spent a considerable sum of money yesterday, mobilizing 200 soldiers to play with an unknown child." Arthur maintained a serene expression, immediately recognizing the strategy. "And what's the problem with that?" "The problem," Richard interjected aggressively, "is that we're concerned about your judgment. Spending a fortune on strangers isn't normal, Uncle." Furthermore, Patricia added with false gentleness, "As a doctor, I must warn you about potential emotional manipulation. Unscrupulous people often use children to take advantage of vulnerable seniors." Rage rose in Arthur's chest like molten lava. "Are you implying that I'm being manipulated by a 6-year-old girl?" "Not implying, Uncle. Stating," Matthew said coldly. "And that's why we've brought these documents. We are filing a petition to challenge your mental capacity and to place a temporary hold on your financial assets." The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur looked at the 3 faces before him, people who carried his blood but had become strangers, driven by the most sordid greed. "You think 3 years of grief have turned me senile?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "We think you're making irrational decisions that compromise the family estate," Patricia replied. "As your doctor, I recommend an urgent psychiatric evaluation." "You haven't been my doctor in years, Patricia, and this estate is mine, built with my own sweat and dedication," Arthur retorted, his voice carrying all the military authority he possessed. Matthew stood up, taking a confrontational stance. "Uncle, with all due respect, since Aunt Clara died, you've been isolated, depressed, with no social contact. Suddenly a child appears, and you start behaving in a completely atypical manner. Any psychiatrist would confirm that this indicates emotional instability." "What do you really want?" Arthur asked, cutting to the chase. "We want you to stop these impulsive charities," Richard said, "and to accept our temporary conservatorship over your finances until you are emotionally stable." Arthur laughed bitterly. "Conservatorship? You want to control my money because you're afraid I'll spend your inheritance before I die." "This isn't about inheritance," Patricia lied. "It's about protecting you." "Lies," Arthur said, pushing himself up from his chair with difficulty but maintaining all his dignity. "You never cared about me as a person. When Clara died, how many times did you visit? How many times did you ask if I was okay?" The momentary discomfort on their faces confirmed his suspicions. "Now that I've found a purpose, you want to stop me. But you won't succeed," he declared firmly. Matthew smiled coldly. "Uncle, the petition has already been filed. A process server will be here tomorrow morning, and we have a temporary injunction that will be issued today, freezing any significant financial transactions pending the psychiatric evaluation." The words hit Arthur like bullets. In that moment, he realized that the battle for Sophia and Eleanor had just become far more complex than he had ever imagined. 2 days after his nephew's visit, Arthur received the official notice that confirmed his worst fears. The temporary injunction had been issued, partially freezing his financial assets until he underwent a psychiatric evaluation. Any transaction over $5,000 would require prior court approval. He immediately tried to contact the private hospital where he had scheduled Eleanor's exams, but the secretary was clear. Without advance payment for the treatment, the appointment would be cancelled. The amount needed for the diagnostic procedures far exceeded the limit allowed by the injunction. With a heavy heart, Arthur went to the park, hoping to find Sophia and explain the situation. He couldn't just disappear from their lives without a word, but he didn't know how to explain to a 6-year-old the legal complexities that were preventing him from helping. He found them on the same bench, but the scene that greeted him was devastating. Eleanor was visibly worse, her breathing even more labored, and Sophia held her hand with a worried expression that no child should have to wear. Arthur. Sophia ran to him as soon as she saw him, but her usual smile was tinged with sadness. Grandma got really sick last night. She coughed up a lot of blood and had a high fever. The general felt the world collapse on his shoulders. Every hour of delay could be crucial for Eleanor's diagnosis and treatment, but his hands were legally tied by relatives who cared only about money. "How are you, Miss Eleanor?" he asked, approaching the bench. The old woman tried to smile, but it was clear she was fighting intense pain. I'm trying to be strong for Sophia," she murmured with difficulty. "Grandma, tell him what the doctor at the clinic said," Sophia insisted innocently. Eleanor hesitated, clearly not wanting to worry her granddaughter. "I managed to get an appointment at the public clinic yesterday. The doctor said, I need urgent tests at the hospital. He suspects something serious with my lungs." "And when were you able to schedule the tests?" Arthur asked, already dreading the answer. 2 months from now," she answered, her voice breaking. "They said it's urgent, but there are no openings before then. And even if there were, I can't afford the medicine he prescribed." Sophia looked between the 2 adults, sensing the gravity of the situation even without fully understanding. "Arthur, can't you help Grandma like you helped me with the soldiers?" The innocent question was like a knife to the general's heart. How could he explain to this child that his own family was stopping him from saving the life of the most important person in her world? "Sophia, It's complicated right now," he said, struggling to find the right words. At that moment, Arthur's phone rang. It was Matthew, his nephew. "Uncle, I hope you're understanding the seriousness of the situation," the cold voice said on the other end of the line. "Any attempt to circumvent the injunction will result in severe legal consequences." "Ow. Did you know I was trying to help someone?" Arthur asked, a terrible suspicion forming in his mind. "We have our methods." "You are being monitored for your own protection," Matthew replied with false concern. The revelation that he was being watched by his own family left Arthur furious, but also more determined. He hung up and looked at Sophia and Eleanor with a decision forming in his mind. "Miss Eleanor, do you trust me?" he asked directly. The old woman nodded slowly. "I do, General. Sophia told me you are a good person." "Then I need you to trust me a little longer. I will find a way to help you, even if it costs me everything I have." Sophia squeezed his hand tightly. "Promise, Arthur?" Looking into the child's hopeful eyes, and then at Eleanor's pale face, Arthur made the decision that would change the course of the entire story. The next morning, Arthur's phone woke him with a jolt. On the other end of the line, the trembling voice of one of Eleanor's neighbors delivered the news he had been dreading. General Mitchell? Miss Eleanor got very sick during the night. Sophia gave me your number. They're at City General Hospital now, but it's critical." Arthur didn't hesitate. He dressed quickly and had Frank, his driver, take him to the hospital immediately. On the way, he tried calling his medical contacts but hit the same wall. Without court authorization to move the necessary funds, no private hospital would take the case. City General Hospital was a cruel reflection of a broken system. Crowded hallways, gurneys in the corridors, entire families camped out waiting for care. Arthur had never been in such an environment. His position had always granted him access to the best private medical services. He found Sophia sitting alone in a plastic chair in the pediatric wing, swinging her little legs nervously. When she saw him approach in his wheelchair, she ran into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "Arthur, Grandma's really sick. The doctor said she needs a very expensive surgery, and if she doesn't get it soon, she might... Sophia couldn't finish the sentence, sobbing against the general's chest. A nurse approached, recognizing the child's distress. "Sir, are you family?" "I'm a friend of the family," Arthur replied. "How is she?" The nurse glanced around to make sure Sophia couldn't hear and lowered her voice. "Sir, the situation is grave. The patient has an advanced lung tumor that needs to be removed urgently. We've stabilized her for now, but we don't have the specialized surgical capacity here. The wait list is at least 6 months. And what would it cost at a private hospital?" Arthur asked, already knowing the answer would drastically exceed his current limits. "Somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000, including the surgery, hospitalization, and subsequent chemotherapy," the nurse replied with regret. "It's a figure very few families can afford." The world crashed down on Arthur. Even with his considerable fortune, the court injunction made it impossible to access that amount of money quickly. His nephews had calculated their move precisely to prevent any significant impulsive spending. Sophia tugged on his sleeve, interrupting his thoughts. "Arthur, I did something wrong," she said in a tiny voice. "What was it, little one?" I told the doctors you were my grandpa and that you would pay for Grandma's treatment. They said if a family member guarantees payment, they can transfer her to a better hospital today." Arthur's heart ached at the child's desperation. She had lied, hoping he could fix everything, but he was powerless, bound by legal chains. "Sophia, I want to help more than anything in the world, but there are people stopping me from using my money right now," he explained gently. The girl's eyes filled with a profound sadness. "So Grandma is going to die because of money?" The simple, devastating question echoed down the hallway, causing several people to look their way. Arthur felt a rage build in his chest. Rage at his nephews, at the system, at his own impotence. "Please, Sophia, just give me a little time. I will find a solution," he promised, having no idea how he would keep that promise. At that moment, Sophia did something that shattered the general's heart completely. She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes and said, "I'm sorry, Arthur. I'm sorry for causing you trouble. Grandma is sick because of me, and now you're in trouble because of us too." Arthur pulled the girl into a tight hug, realizing he had reached the most critical moment of the entire situation. He had to find a way to save 2 lives before it was too late. Arthur spent the night at the hospital, holding Sophia in his arms as she slept fitfully in the hallway chair. His mind worked feverishly, analyzing every possibility, every resource he still had. He had fought in wars, faced impossible odds, but he had never felt so cornered. At 5 in the morning, an idea began to form. It was risky, controversial, but perhaps his only chance to save Eleanor and expose his nephew's greed. He picked up his phone and made a call that would change everything. "Mark, it's General Mitchell. I know it's early, but I need an urgent favor. Are you still at NNN?" Mark Peters, a veteran journalist Arthur had met on military press tours, answered in surprise. "General, Of course, I'm the editor-in-chief now. What can I do for you? I need a press conference today, and I want it broadcast live. 3 hours later, the city's major media outlets were gathered in the main hall of City General Hospital. Arthur had used his last influential contacts to organize the event, betting everything on a single play. Sophia was by his side, holding his hand with renewed confidence. Arthur had explained his plan simply. They would tell the whole country the truth and ask for help. The cameras went live simultaneously as Arthur took the microphone. His voice carried all the authority of decades of command, but also a human vulnerability that immediately touched the audience. My name is General Arthur H. Mitchell. I served my country for 40 years. I fought in wars, I received medals, but today I come before you as an ordinary man fighting the most important battle of his life. He paused, allowing the cameras to focus on Sophia beside him. This is Sophia Marie Williams. She is 6 years old. 1 week ago, she saved my life with a simple hug when I had lost all hope. Today, I need to save hers. The emotion in his voice was palpable as he told the entire story. The meeting in the park, their shared loneliness, the discovery of Eleanor's illness. When he got to the part about his nephews, his voice took on a tone of controlled outrage. My own nephews, driven by greed, have secured a court injunction that prevents me from using my own fortune to save the life of a 60-year-old woman. They claim I am being manipulated by a 6-year-old child. Arthur turned to Sophia, who was looking at him with admiration. Sophia, tell America what you think I should do with my money. The little girl took the microphone with both hands and spoke with the sincerity only a child possesses. I think money is for helping people. My grandma always said it's no use having a lot if you don't share with people who need it. Arthur is good. He just wants my grandma to get better. The impact of Sophia's words was immediate. In TV studios, anchors had tears in their eyes. On social media, the video began to go viral within minutes. Arthur took back the microphone for the final blow. I am making a public decision today. I want to adopt Sophia Marie Williams as my granddaughter. I want to care for Miss Eleanor as if she were my own mother. And if that means giving up my entire fortune to save them, I will do it without hesitation. He looked directly into the main cameras. Matthew, Richard, Patricia, if you're watching, you can have the inheritance you so desperately want. But you will not stop me from using everything I've built in my life to save the people who truly love. The silence in the hall was broken by a spontaneous round of applause from the journalists. Sophia climbed onto Arthur's lap and hugged him tightly, whispering, "Thank you for fighting for Grandpa Arthur." It was the first time anyone had called him Grandpa, and Arthur felt his heart fill with a love he didn't know he was still capable of feeling. The fallout from the press conference was immediate and overwhelming. In less than 2 hours, the story of the general and the girl was a top trending topic nationwide. Social media exploded with messages of support, solidarity hashtags, and furious criticism of the greedy nephews. The first phone call came before noon. It was the judge presiding over the case, Judge Reynolds, informing him that public pressure and media fallout had dramatically accelerated the proceedings. The injunction would be reviewed on an emergency basis that very day. Gradually, the hospital transformed into a point of pilgrimage. Ordinary people began showing up with donations for Eleanor, flowers for Sophia, and messages of support for Arthur. Military veterans, many of whom had served under his command, organized a vigil in the parking lot. Colonel Evans arrived at midday, accompanied by a delegation of high-ranking officers. "General," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you put us all to shame. While you were fighting the most important battle of your life, we were at home watching television. This isn't my battle, Evans. It's ours. It's always been our responsibility to take care of one another," Arthur replied, watching Sophia play with a few soldiers who had brought her military history books, adapted for children. At 2 in the afternoon, Three familiar figures appeared at the hospital. Matthew, Richard, and Patricia walked with their heads down, clearly shamed by the public exposure of their motives. The hostility from the onlookers was palpable. Some people recognized them immediately from the news. "Uncle," Matthew began, hesitantly, "we need to talk." "Now you want to talk?" Arthur asked coldly. "After the entire country knows your true intentions?" Patricia stepped forward, her face flushed with shame. "Uncle, we made a mistake. We didn't realize how much you truly care for this family." "You didn't make a mistake," Arthur corrected her with authority. "You revealed exactly who you are, and the whole country saw it." Richard, visibly shaken, muttered, "People are sending us horrible messages. Our kids are being harassed at school. We can't even leave the house. And how do you think I felt, being treated like I was senile by my own family?" Arthur retorted. "How do you think Sophia felt, watching her grandmother die for lack of money? That I had, but that you stopped me from using." At that moment, a court officer arrived with documents that changed everything. "General Mitchell, by order of Judge Reynolds, the temporary injunction is hereby dissolved. Your accounts have been unfrozen, and the conservatorship petition has been dismissed for lack of merit." The crowd in the hospital erupted in applause as the news spread. Sophia ran into Arthur's arms, finally understanding that her grandmother could be saved. But the biggest surprise came 15 minutes later, when a team of doctors from Mount Sinai Hospital arrived in a state-of-the-art mobile ICU. "General Mitchell, we're from Dr. Robert Hansen's team. We're here to transfer Ms. Eleanor Williams for emergency surgery. All costs have already been covered." Arthur looked confused. "But I haven't had time to make the transfer yet." The doctor smiled. "Sir, after your press conference, we received over 200,000 calls offering donations. Business leaders, politicians, ordinary citizens. We've raised enough to treat not only Ms. Eleanor, but another 50 families in the same situation." As the medics prepared Eleanor for the transfer, she squeezed Arthur's hand tightly. "General, how can I ever thank you for what you've done for us, Miss Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a family. I'm the one who should be thanking you." Sophia looked at her cousins, who stood in silence, then at Arthur. Grandpa, can they come to dinner at our big table too?" The innocent question made Matthew, Richard, and Patricia break down completely. The three of them began to cry, finally realizing the depth of what they had almost destroyed. 2 weeks after that first meeting in Central Park, the Mitchell townhouse had been completely transformed. The once silent hallways now echoed with children's laughter, lively conversations, and the comforting sounds of a real family. Eleanor, recovering magnificently from her surgery, occupied the master bedroom on the ground floor, specially adapted for her needs. Sophia ran through gardens that were once impeccably empty, now filled with colorful toys and playground equipment Arthur had installed. The swimming pool, unused for years, was alive again with the swimming lessons she took every afternoon. The main dining room, with its table for 12, finally served its purpose. Every night they gathered there. Arthur, Sophia, Eleanor, and often the friends they had made along their journey. Colonel Evans became a regular presence, as did some of the soldiers who had taken part in that magical morning in the park. Matthew, Richard, and Patricia were also gradually reintegrated into the family. The public humiliation had changed them profoundly, and they now made a genuine effort to regain the trust and respect they had lost. Sophia, with her infinite capacity for forgiveness, always greeted them with smiles, teaching the adults lessons about second chances. The biggest change, however, was the transformation of part of the property into a community center for underprivileged children. Arthur used his influence and resources to create the Project Hug Foundation, an organization offering educational activities, meals, and medical care to children in vulnerable situations. Retired soldiers worked as volunteers, teaching discipline, respect, and values through recreational activities. What began as a game with 200 men in the park had become a social movement benefiting hundreds of families. On this particular morning, Arthur was watching Sophia learn to ride a bike in the main garden. Her small hands gripped the handlebars tightly as he helped her keep her balance, gently pushing his wheelchair alongside the bike. "Grandpa, I think I can do it myself now," she shouted, full of confidence. Arthur carefully let go of the bike and watched her pedal for a few yards before stopping, radiant with pride. "I did it! Grandma, did you see? I can ride a bike!" Eleanor, sitting comfortably in a chair on the porch, clapped enthusiastically. Her grey hair shone in the morning sun, and her smile radiated the peace of someone who had found a safe place to grow old with dignity. "I saw my sweet granddaughter. You're becoming a very brave young lady," she replied, her voice strong and clear, a far cry from the weak whispers of weeks ago. Arthur approached the porch and positioned his chair next to Eleanor. Together, they watched Sophia explore every corner of the garden on her new bike, discovering trails and adventures that only a 6-year-old can see. "General," Eleanor said softly, "sometimes I wake up thinking this is all a dream. A beautiful home, medical care, a family. How is it possible that our lives have changed so much?" Arthur smiled, remembering that grey afternoon that seemed to have happened in another lifetime. "Miss Eleanor, I used to think the most important victories were found on battlefields, in medals, in public recognition. But I've learned that true victory lies in moments like this." Sophia stopped her bike in front of them, sweaty and happy. "Grandpa, after lunch, can we visit the park where we met?" "Of course, little one. How about we take some toys for the other kids who play there?" Sophia's eyes lit up at the idea. This was how she had learned to see the world, always thinking about how to include and help others who might be experiencing the loneliness she had known so well. That afternoon, the three of them returned to Central Park. But now they arrived as a family, carrying bags full of toys, books, and snacks to distribute. The bench where Arthur had once wept alone became a meeting point for other needy children, who now had Sophia as an ambassador of joy and Arthur as a silent protector. As he watched Sophia organize a game with children she had just met, Arthur finally understood the true meaning of his existence. He wasn't here to accumulate wealth or achieve military glory. He was here to be the grandfather Sophia deserved, the son Eleanor needed, and the example that a simple hug can save 2 lives at once. The park, once the witness to his deepest pain, now symbolized rebirth and hope. Here, where it all began with tears of despair, now blossomed smiles of gratitude and the promise of a future. Arthur had learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters, and what truly mattered was right there, running toward him with open arms, shouting, "Grandpa," with the pure joy of someone who knows she is deeply loved. As the sun set over the city, 3 generations, united not by blood but by unconditional love, walked home together. A house that had ceased to be a silent mausoleum and had become a home filled with life, laughter, and hope.